Hey guys, welcome to the first lecture. In this lecture, we're going to be going over. I will see you guys. Hey guys, welcome to this first time of thing. If you're using it, I just want to go over this briefly before we get to the next lesson. These are some helpful links you'll find over here if you need to go in and look at things like the manual and other things on the Blender website. There's a lot of good things here to check out when you have some time. Over here, you'll find your recent projects. So as you can see here, I've been working on some things for this course. And if you don't want to have to go digging through your hard drive to find what you've been doing, every time you open Blender, you should be able to just pull up what you've been working on last here, and it will save you a little bit of time there. And the last thing that I'll talk about in this little dialogue is this interaction preset that you can drop down here. What this will do is if you're transitioning from another piece of 3D software, this will try to set up Blender's interaction with keyboard and mouse settings so that they're a little more familiar, such as the keyboard shortcuts and mouse settings you would find within 3ds Max or Maya. And so if you're not familiar with those pieces of software and you're new to 3D and this is the first 3D program you've used, don't worry about this. But just know that if you're used to these 3D programs and one of the reasons you've been hesitant to get into Blender is because of the differences there, this can ease the learning process, the learning curve. Hey guys, in this lecture I'm going to be breaking down the panels that you see around the screen, and we're going to be going over what they are, some of the options you can find inside of each of them, and then we're going to move on and get started with navigation in 3D. So if you are following along, you may still have the splash screen showing from the first lecture, so to get rid of that, all you have to do is left click off to the side, and it will go away. So I'm going to start at the top of the screen, and I'm just going to kind of work my way around describing what I can see all the way around. This top bar right here is called the info panel, and it's going to contain options that are related to loading, saving, quitting, things within the scene, and you can also find the user preferences under File here. It's got a couple of other menus, most notably the Help menu, and it will also contain some information about the renderer that you're using and objects that are contained within the 3D viewport. If you look to the left here, you're going to be able to see the Tool panel, and if I drag this over a little bit to expand the window, you're going to see these multiple tabs on the far left, and if you click through each of these, they're going to give you different options that are related to different parts of Blender's toolset. So if you go to the Create tab, you'll be able to create objects that will be put into the 3D scene here. So we'll be going over more of that later. At the very bottom of the screen, you can see what looks like sort of a line with a bunch of numbers. I was going to say football field, but this is called the timeline. And if you left click and drag in here, it will change your current position in time within the 3D scene. So as you can see, as I drag around, the numbers here and here will change, and this is going to tell you what the current frame is that you're on. So we will talk a little bit more about how this works and what it can do, but we're not going to be covering a lot of animation in this course, so it won't be super necessary. On the far right is this is the properties panel, and so inside of this you're going to find most of the options for manipulating things that are found within the 3D scene here. So if you go through, you've got all these tabs, and each tab contains information that's related to modifying or adding options that will change how we see things, how we interact, and how your scene is basically set up. And then lastly, up here, we've got the outliner. This contains a breakdown of all the objects that are within your scene. So if you go through here, you'll notice that within the 3D view, we've got 3 objects. We've got a camera, we've got a cube, and we've got this lamp here. And so these are listed right here. And if I left click, I can just go through and it will select these for me. And then you're going to have other options like your world settings, render layers if you have those, and things like that. And so we will get into more about each of the panels around the screen in other lectures, but I wanted to just go through and give you a very brief explanation of what they all are. And lastly, before we wrap this lecture, this panel in the middle here is the 3D viewport. It's where you're going to be spending quite a bit of your time. And again, we will get more into how to use this panel and get in here manipulating objects and things like that in lectures to come. So thank you guys for listening, and I will see you in the next lecture. Alright guys, starting with this lecture, we're going to be getting a little deeper into Blender's panel system, starting with this info panel at the very top of the screen. So if you go to the very top, the info panel is going to go all the way from the left to the far right of the screen. It's going to look kind of like a system menu, and you can drag it down a little bit, and you can see some of the system commands here. This is going to output some of the commands that you perform in 3D. It's useful for debug purposes, and if you ever get into Blender development or using the Python scripting engine within Blender, some of these things in here are things that may be of interest to you. So I'm going to drag that back into place, just know that it's there. I'm not going to go over all the options, but I will show you the ones that I think are important when you're first starting out. So when you are in the panel systems, realize that all the panels can change and be altered to suit whatever needs that you have within Blender's interface. You can completely rearrange the screen any way you want. So by default, this info panel is at the very top of the screen. If you wanted to change this to something else, you could go to this far left icon. It's right now set to the info icon, and you could change this to any one of these and then alter this panel to be something else. So let's get into it. The file menu is the first menu you see in the info panel. If you go in here, you're going to recognize most of these commands because you're going to be able to find them in software that you use on a bunch of other things in your computer. So if you want to create a new scene, you can come up here to the new command. You can open a scene if someone else created or that you're going to modify, save a new one, and do things like import, export models, link objects, things like that. We'll get more into how these sorts of things work when we get into managing the scene, building models, things like that later in the course. You can come in here and quit the program down here. And the only other thing that's really handy right now in this menu to know about is this user preferences button that you can find here. If you click this, it'll open up all of the settings that will change how you interact with Blender, and you can really come in here and do handy things like set up custom keyboard shortcuts, change the way that Blender's theme, so if you don't like the colors, you can fix that. Set up system paths and change settings with memory, so if you want to optimize Blender for the type of system that you have, you can do things like that. And I have an entire lecture set aside for going through each of these panels and discussing key options within them that I use, and so we'll learn how to set this up later. Let's move on to the next menu. It's the render menu. You'll remember rendering from the section in the first lecture that we had where we discussed the last process in the pipeline, which is the rendering process. And if you remember, rendering is just the process of taking the scene that we have here in this 3D viewport, rendering it out to a final image or an animation. So this menu will allow you to come in here, render an image or an animation. These options are to do with quick preview options that you can see within the 3D viewport. It won't be a final render, but it'll be a quick render. And this will show you the last render that you currently stored in memory, and this will allow you to play back an animation. So these are handy options. I usually don't use this menu. I come over here to the properties panel, which we'll discuss later, and I use the render settings here to go through here because I feel like it's a little more intuitive. So be aware that within Blender, if you're looking for settings and buttons to navigate with, even though you may find them in one menu, typically there's buttons for them around, and as always, there's probably a keyboard shortcut that there is set up by default in Blender, or you can always create your own. So very handy. This window panel is very useful. If you've got a dual screen setup, it's going to be really handy for you because you can come in here and duplicate the window. And if you drag this off, you can see that you'll be able to split the interface onto two separate views and completely rearrange the layout. So you can do two separate things at once. The help menu is the last menu we'll go over here, and it's basically all the same information you found in the splash screen in the link section over here. It will contain the main manual for Blender and a bunch of other stuff on the Blender website. So when you get a chance, definitely get in here and check out different sections of the Blender site. There's a lot of useful information on there, especially when you are looking to get deeper into Blender and expand your capabilities. This button's really handy. It switches the screen layout that you currently have set up. So like I said, Blender's fully customizable, meaning you can come in here and change the settings around, change the panels, and change the layout of the view to anything that suits your needs for your project. And we'll go over some more specifics on how to do that manually. But if you want to come in here and find a quick way to change the layout, you can drop down this menu. It's currently set to default, but if you go through here, you can set it to these presets. And so if I was going to be compositing, I could set this to compositing. It'll bring up the node editor, render view of the camera, image editor, things like that. And this will lay it out so I'm optimized and ready to composite. Same thing for scripting. If you're a programmer, you can come in here and write your own scripts for the Blender itself. Game logic for building games within Blender, and you get the idea. So this is really handy, and you can also create custom presets by clicking this plus icon, which will allow you to rearrange things the way you want, and then save it by clicking that as a custom named option. So I'm going to go back to default. The next one over is the scene dropdown, and so here's what this does. If you're in Blender and you've got a scene set up, it's going to default to the scene right here, which is just called scene, and it contains these objects inside. If you were in a more complicated project, you might have multiple scenes listed out here. You can create scenes by, again, clicking that plus icon. And what it will allow you to do is set up a scene, an animation, whatever kind of shot that you have in this scene right here. You can give it a name and then create a new one. And what it will do is clear out everything that you see in the 3D viewport here and change it just for that specific scene. So you can work on this scene, switch to another one, work on that one, and it will allow you to organize your file and keep things in order so that you can work on multiple shots or what have you. This dropdown will change the current render engine that Blender is using. For the purposes of this course, for the introduction, we're just going to be using a Blender renderer, and there's so many things you can achieve with it that some of you may learn the Blender rendering engine and stick with it for the longevity of your career, depending on the kinds of things you're using Blender for. If you get more advanced in Blender, you can change this to the Cycles rendering engine, and a lot of people now are using the Cycles rendering engine because it's newer and it's a lot more advanced and allows you to create a little bit more photorealistic looking renders quicker than you can do with the internal rendering engine. So last thing I'll go over is this section over here. It contains information about objects that are found within the 3D viewport right here. So if you look at the scene, you can see that we've got these three objects, which you can see are listed here. Each one of these has a name, so if you click through these, you can see that the name of the object is listed here. And you'll see various other pieces of information about the scene, such as how many vertices are in the scene completely, how many faces, triangles, objects, etc. Memory is just showing you how much memory the scene is currently occupying. So be aware that as this number continues to grow, if you are working on something with a really heavy model in terms of geometry, it may start slowing your system down. It just depends on your system settings. So be aware that that's always there to kind of give you an idea of how much memory you're using, so you can keep an eye on that and keep things rolling. So guys, I want to thank you for listening to this lesson. That's it for the info panel, and the next section we're going to be covering another panel, and I'll see you there. Hey guys, welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we're going to be going over this outliner panel in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Now, the outliner is going to show you all of the data Blender sees when it looks at your scene. So as we talked about in the first lecture in this course, we've got the information panel up here displaying scene right here. Now, this scene is the exact same scene you see listed over here in the outliner. So if I change this to the main scene. You see